Hello, my name is Cahit Barkanoza, and I am a software engineer in Turkey that uses Java. And today I will record my top viewed article. It's 80 common Java interview questions for junior Java developers. I have some technical interview experience, so I gathered these questions for you. So what are stack and heap? Stack and heap is important to understand a lot of the things for Java. So basically, stack is used for storing the order of the method execution and local variables, like reference of objects. On the other hand, heap memory stores the objects and uses dynamic memory allocation. So these answers are like in a summary. You need to search. I suggest you to search more deeply, but the questions are the important ones. So what is new with Java 8? So in comments, someone asked like jokes about Java 8 in 2022. Come on, be real. But I get this question in a technical interview with one of the popular Chinese company. I don't want to say its name. So they asked like, what is new with Java 8 and are you using it? Have you experienced, what's up with it? So it has Lambda functional programming, new APIs for datetime. It's local date, maybe, new streaming API. Streaming is important. You can also check my basic Java 8 features article, or you can wait so I can make its video. And optional class. The optional class is also important. I'm using it. So what is solid? Solid is an OOP standard, and this is one of the most common questions you need to know. You need to know and also apply it. Single responsibility, open clause principle, least cost substitution, interface segregation, and dependency inversion. And you need to know what are they for real. Like an entity or a class should have a single responsibility and should be open to extension but closed to modification. Subclasses should be substitutable with their subclasses, and classes should not inherit interfaces that they do not need. This also means, I answered this like this in an interview, and they fixed my answer by saying this means interfaces should have methods as little amount as possible. Every interface should have one method or two methods. They say like that. And dependency inversion, classes should not be dependent on each other rigidly. They should be loosely coupled. This can be done by constructor injection, field injection, etc. You can find this on my Spring Core article also. There's a design pattern. What are design pattern categories? So they are common problems, solutions that is gathered by software developers. So you can be sure if you are using that design pattern that is right answer, and you can also communicate with other software developers by using their names. For example, when you say singleton pattern, they understand what it is. They know how to implement it. You need to know these. And then also they can ask, what are singleton, factory? These are the most common design patterns: factory, abstract factory, builder, prototype, adapter, decorator, command, observer, strategy, template, design patterns, how to implement them. I can't explain all of them. Also, these are not enough. You need to check them. You can check the UMLs. You can see some Java example codes. Decorator, command. Knowing these will make you a better programmer, a better engineer. It's a must for being a senior engineer. And also reflection. What is reflection in Java? In Java, reflection is used to inspect classes, interfaces, fields, and methods at runtime. Reflection lets you have fields, methods, classes, and their names not preferred in production code because of the performance issues, preferred by frameworks and code generators. So you might know, you can't reach a private field, But using a reflection, you can, and this is used by frameworks, code generators, etc. What are checked and unchecked errors? What are their differences? So checked exceptions is caught at compile time, for example, IO exception and SQL exception. On the other hand, unchecked exception is caught at runtime, like arithmetic, null pointer, out of bounds exceptions. What is encapsulation? They probably going to ask you the purpose of OOP, the most common features of OOP, like encapsulation. You protect the fields and reach with getters and setters. How this helps us, and they can also ask inheritance, how it helps us, etc. So these are more technical questions. What is the difference between the equal sign and dot equals? So they expect you to know if equals checks their variables memory addresses. On the other hand, equals method checks the value inside them. Now, what are the immutable and mutable? So how do we prefer immutable? Why do we prefer immutable? So mutable objects can be changed to any value or state without adding a new object. In the case of immutable objects, whenever we change the state of the object, a new object will be created. We prefer immutable because immutable classes are trait safe. So string are immutable, as you might know. When you new or changes value, it will delete from the memory and create a new variable in the memory. How to make an object immutable? An immutable object is created by using the final class. Private fields and final mutable objects it has only getters. What is a final keyword and where it is used? There are final classes, final methods, and final fields. No class can inherit from the final class. That's the purpose of the final class. And the final method cannot be overridden when its class gets extended. And the final field's value cannot be changed when its value is given. You can make a final field and add its value using a constructor, etc. So what are the access modifiers? There are private, default, protected, and public. So default is none. You don't see access modifier. Private is only accessible from the same class, and public can be accessed from everywhere. Default only accessible from the same package, and protected is only accessible from the same package, but also when a class gets inherited, you can also reach on the superclasses. What is the synchronized keyword? We need to synchronize the shared resources to ensure that at a time only one thread is able to access the shared resource. I also have concurrency article. I don't think it's enough. It's really basic. Concurrency is more advanced topic of Java. What are JPA fetch strategies, lazy eager? This is important for Spring. This is not exactly Java, it's Spring framework, but Spring framework is one of the most important frameworks, most popular frameworks with Java, and knowing it will open you a lot of doors for job applications. So fetch type eager. Eager means the persistence provider must load the related annotated field or property when the program runs. This is the default behavior of these hibernate fields. You can also check by hibernate article. On the other hand, lazy, the persistence provider should load data when it's first accessed, but can be loaded eagerly. So we sometimes use lazy, and it solves some problems. For example, when using many-to-many, when you run, it starts gets in a loop of creating a class. So we prefer doing lazy fetching. What are the properties of transactions? ACID. So ACID is an abbreviation, stands for atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. This is also well known from relational databases. Atomicity, entire transaction takes place at once or does not happen at all, like abort and commit. Consistency, integrity constraints must be maintained so that the database is consistent before and after the transaction. Isolation, transactions occur independently without interference. And durability, change persists even if a system failure occurs. What is N+1 problem? It's an ORM problem. If we use an ORM function, ORM means object relational model, we might request a query as many as the rows returned and from our query instead of a single SQL query. Let's see an example we can understand better. Select all from cars, select all from wheels where car ID is something. So select all from wheels. So when we use ORM, we can, it makes it like this. It asks queries like this. On the other hand, it could do it like this. So this is a one query. On the other hand, this makes an N+1 query, and that's the problem. And we need to know that also. The advantages of Spring Framework. So it's lightweight. It uses POJOs, plain old Java objects. It's flexible. There are libraries that makes it flexible. There are powerful abstractions like JPA, etc. It abstracts the actions. The declarative programming, we just write the method name and it does the job. Declarative support, like declarative transactions, we just add the transaction annotation, it does the job. And loose coupling, dependency injection is also important. What is dependency injection? Setter field constructor injections. So dependency injection is a programming technique that makes a class independent of its dependencies. It achieves that by decoupling the usage of an object from its creation. There are three injection ways. Constructor injection is the most popular one, and we commonly do it. Setting a private object inside the constructor used for mandatory dependencies. You can also use Lombok. You use an annotation that creates it and injects it by itself, or the record that came with Java 14. I'm not really professional on that. I will study on that. Setter injection, calling the setter method on the bean after it has been instantiated with no argument and constructor optional dependencies. It's used for optional dependencies. And field injection uses reflection implemented by adding an auto-word on a field. It's avoided because it is costlier. An interface has two implementations. How does Spring decide which to implement? So one way, it has a qualifier, shows which one is to inject. On the other one, a primary annotation, and it says a primary implementation. So this one is more primary. And the third way, making variables name with the implementation's name. So variables name matches the implementation's name. It can be done. What is the application context? You can also check this from my Spring Core article. It is Spring IOC container and is responsible for instantiating, configuring, configuration metadata, and assembling the beans. What are the Spring bean scopes? Bean scopes define the lifecycle and visibility of that bean. There are six types of scopes: singleton, prototype, request, session, application, WebSocket. What is the inversion of control, IOC? So delegation of control of dependencies from developer to the framework. Inversion of control. So as you can understand, there's a control and it inverts from where to where. So in a default thing, programmer controls which layer should be dependent to that. And on the IOC, the framework does all the dependencies, handles all the fields, relationships. This is called IOC. What is the Spring annotation for transaction management? At transactional, default is required. There are 7 types of transactions, transaction propagations. What are these transaction propagations? Required. This is the default one. If there's an active transaction, it is connected to it. Otherwise, it will create a new transaction. Supports Checks if there is an active transaction. If there is, it will continue using that transaction. Otherwise, it will continue as a non-transaction. Mandatory. Checks if there's an active transaction. If there is, it continues using that. Otherwise, it gives an error. Requires new. Checks if there's an active transaction. If it exists, it suspends it and creates a new transaction. Not supported. Checks if there is an active transaction. If it does, it suspends it and executes non-transactional. And never. Spring throws an error if there's an active transaction. And there's nested. We don't really use it, and I don't know why it exists. So I'm just gonna pass. Difference between equals and hash code. So equals are used. So these are coming from the object class. Object class gets extended from every class, but you don't really see it, but it exists. So equals are used to compare two objects, while the hash code is used in hashing to decide which group an object should be categorized into. So hash code returns the hash code value of an object on a calling. So hash code creates a hash code for every single object. It's used for comparing the objects, are they same or not. Hash code, if you don't know what a hash code is, it's like a unique identity. Equals also compares, but its values are compared, and you are overriding it if you are creating your own custom class object. What is Kafka? This is not really common, but I wanted to add it because for Java it's used. Kafka stores, reads, analyzes a stream of data. The producer creates messages and consumer receives messages. So Kafka, Docker, and etc. These are not really related with Java, but they are asked like, we are using this technology. Do you have any experience it? If you say yes, I did this, and you can say like, this works like this. I know this, but I have no experience. These kind of things will add you value and will you the dominant applicants for the job. You will be selected at the end. So what is Docker? Docker is a containerization platform. It has a client-server architecture, and Docker daemon does the building, running, and distribution. On hardware, there are containers running in threads on top of our OS. Applications are downloaded from the repository in containers and run. What are the basic concepts of object-oriented programming? Okay, this is important. Objects are tangible or intangible entities that have their own characteristics and exhibits various attributes by being in a certain situation depending on their characteristics. Class is a set of objects of the same type. Methods are the concept that determines what an object can do. Inheritance are the practice of a class taking a certain characteristics and attributes from a higher class and applying different features and attributes. Abstractions means that the properties of the object that are required for the application are coded, while the other properties are not coded. Polymorphism allows objects to be represented as different types beside their own type. Encapsulation means hiding information about the work and state of the object and its functional complexity. What is framework? The project can be built according to that core structure. The difference between a library and a framework is that your code calls libraries, but frameworks calls your code and runs like that. What is a compiler? It's an application that translates source codes in any programming language into a machine language. What is HTTP? It's a system that regulates the rules and methods of how information is transferred between servers and end users on the internet. What is authentication? It is checked the user's identity. It is used to log into system. Authorization, to verify the user's access to resources. It's used to operate the system. So these two values are mixed. They also can ask like, what is authentication and the difference between authorization. Authentication checks your key. You come to a door, you arrive to a door, it checks for your key. Is this key the right to the lock? On the other hand, authorization, it takes you in and checks you. Are you here for, are you the dad of the house, or are you the child of the house? What can you do that can do, anything that can reach, the dad of the family can reach to I don't know, money, the car keys. On the other hand, child can't reach that. It's kind of similar. analogy. What does MVC mean? It's for model view controller. So the model is the part that represents the data, like domain. On the other hand, view is the interface that user sees, and controller is the section where the projects such as database operations and calculations are controlled. What is an API? It is a module created for any application to use certain functions in other applications. API is the door of a house, and you can send letter. You can write, I want the number of the accounts, and then you send to under the door, and you receive an answer. It says 35 accounts, etc. What is SOAP? This is kind of old. Before 2015 there was SOAP, and after that, with mobile phones and etc., there's REST. So what is SOAP? It stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. It means Simple Object Access Protocol. It is a protocol for transferring small amounts of information over the internet. Data is usually sent via HTTP, sometimes TCP/IP. It's an XML format. It forces you to XML format, and you need to define your own actions. On the other hand, REST, it gives you predefined actions like get, post, etc. It's a simple way of exchanging data between client and server. It's faster and it's smaller. The packets are smaller. It uses JSON. It can also use XML and test. It's also sent via HTTP. What is a middleware? It's the intermediate layer. For example, we're designing REST API. We handle authentication with tokens. We are writing a Vive APIs that require tokens. We can create a middleware to check the validity of the token in request to these APIs. Thus, if the incoming request does not pass the control in the middleware, it is directly interrupted. If it passes, it continues on its way. What is SSL? It is sending encrypted data between server and client. What is static? You can also see it as just a parenthesis, like this. It's used to create fields that are created as a code compiled. It's preferred when we want no nullity from the beginning for a variable, like a list. You can use it like a list. You can use it with a list. What are coupling and cohesion? Coupling is the interdependence of classes. It is recommended to minimize coupling for good software. Cohesion, how much is the purpose of creating a class? That's a cohesion. What are the concepts of index, trigger, and stored procedure in SQL? Excuse me. Index, it enables the related table to be processed in order according to the data in column used as an index in a field, like an ID. If you have an ID of something, you can get it instantly, search it instantly. It is used when queries are answered late. Trigger, it means to trigger. It is used to automatically perform another operation when a transaction is made in a database. Stored procedure means it's a piece of code that does a certain job. It does not need to be compiled again after first compilation. What does deadlock mean in SQL? This is taught in operation systems, OS lesson, and database lessons. Two separate transactions are sent to the database, but both will do their job depending on the result of the other transactions. This deadlock situation must be detected in advance and given priority to one. What is a microservice architecture? Application is developed as a collection of services. Every part of the application runs by itself. This creation freedom for technology and development, but creates complexity. The complexity comes from the many possibilities for the error scenarios. Let's say an application that has, let's say, 5 services. There are two or 5 different scenarios for working, not working situations, and we have to decide the behaviors. What is Agile? Agile is an iterative approach to software development that helps teams create working products faster for their customers. It's taught in software development lessons in computer engineering, computer science, bachelor's degrees. Why is Java popular? Any code written in Java can run on virtually in any computing platform. It's not as popular as before. This feature is not that popular because there are Dockerization, containerization now. So the other one is the code is robust enough to independently run Java programs without any external dependencies. Java has experienced consistent development, its memory management and multi-threaded structure. So people ask commonly, is Java dying? Well, people think Java is old, so it must be dying, but programming languages and humans are different things. Humans die when they're old. On the other hand, programming languages die when they are stop getting updates. So Java is alive, and even though it will die instantly, there will be still a lot of code to transform to other popular new languages, and it will take like 30 years of Java, job applications. What is the difference between Arraylist, Hashset in Java? So they are asking you to understand if you know collections well. So possible variations can be list, sets, array differences, stack, queue. So Arraylist has an order of items by the insertion order. On the other hand, Hashset has no order, and they are indexed by their hash code and codes. What is the difference between Arraylist and array? So Arraylist has dynamic memory. The array has a fixed number of elements. Arraylist has more predefined methods than array. Arrays can store primitives and objects, but Arraylist can only store objects. You can use an iterator for Arraylist. What is the difference between Arraylist and Hashlist? So Arraylist allows duplicate values, while Hashset doesn't allow duplicate values. Hashlist does not have any order. Arraylist has order. Hashset versus treeset. Treeset is ordered, but Hashset is not. Hence, Hashset is faster. What is Java class loader? Java class loader are responsible for loading Java classes dynamically to JVM, Java Virtual Machine, during runtime. So explain the main difference between fail-fast, fail-safe iterators. A fail-safe iterator doesn't throw any exception, contrary to a fail-fast iterator. This is because they work on a clone of a collection instead of the original collection, and that's why they are called the fail-safe iterator. Compare the wait and sleep methods in Java. The major difference is that wait releases the lock or monitor, while sleep doesn't release the lock or monitor while waiting. Wait is used for inter-thread communication, while sleep is used to introduce pause on execution. What is the static keyword? The static class is the class inside a class. Static method and static fields are stored in memory instead of the heap, and they belong to the class they are in. They are created at the compile time. They are not accessed by objects, but instead directly. Static structures only access other static structures. Static methods are generally preferred for utility classes like math class. How can you generate random numbers in Java? It's not asked, but you need to know that. You can use it with random next integer max, or using math.random, but you need to do these calculations maximum minimum substitute by minimum and +1 plus minimum. When to use volatile variable in Java, and this is also about concurrency. When you need to instruct the JVM that a variable can be modified by multiple threads and give hint to JVM does not cache its values. When to use a transit variable in Java, when you want to make a variable non-serializable in a class which implements a serializable interface. In other words, you can use it for a variable whose values you don't want to save. Differences between serializable and externalizable in Java. Externalizable gives you more control over the serialization process. Difference between Arraylist and a vector. This has to be on upper questions, before. But most important is that Arraylist is non-synchronized and fast, while vector is synchronized and slow. It's also a legacy class like hashtable. It's legacy. Difference between path and class path. Path is used by operating systems, while class path is used by JVM to locate Java binary, jar files, or class files. Can we override a static method in Java? This is asked. And no, because overriding resolves at runtime, while static methods call is resolved at compile time. and I remember answering this question wrong. 63. Difference between iterator and enumeration in Java. It also gives you the ability to remove an element while iterating, while enumeration does not allow that. And with iterator you can iterate to the back, to the last element, to the first element. But on enumeration you can't do that. What is the race condition and deadlock in Java? We answered deadlock, but let's say it again. We are talking about the difference here. A race condition occurs when multiple concurrently executing processes access a shared data item, and the result of the execution depends on the order in which execution takes place. On the other hand, deadlock means coming to a point where no progress can be made because of fundamental disagreement. So this waits this, and this waits this, so it's a deadlock. On the other hand, race condition, they access to the same data, and they change data in the wrong way. So that's it. The basic principles of OOP, we also answered that. Abstraction, polymorphism, encapsulation, inheritance. A string builder versus string buffer. A string buffer is synchronized and preferred for concurrent programs. On the other hand, string builder works faster and used for single-threaded applications. What are the different ways to create threads in Java? There are two ways, implementing a runnable interface or extending the thread class. What is synchronization in Java? Synchronization is a technique to control access of a method with multiple threads at the same time. If we declare a method synchronized, then only one thread can use this method at a time. This is basically used for thread safety. Shallow copy versus deep copy. This is also exists in other languages like Python. In shallow copy, only fields of the primitive data types are copied, while the object references are not copied. Deep copy involves the copy of primitive data types as well as the object references. What is Spring IOC container? The core of the Spring framework creates the objects, configures and assembles their dependencies, and manages their entire life cycle. The container uses dependency injection to manage the components that make up the application. How does configuration metadata provided to the Spring container? Either XML-based, annotation-based, or Java-based configuration exists. The most popular way is annotation-based. These are Spring container. Yeah, this is about Spring core. Auto-wiring in Spring used for searching and matching being definition in the configuration file. It's preferred to not use. You rather use constructor injection in nowadays. Defining a private final field and accessing it, initiating it with a constructor or using a Lombok constructor annotation. What are the thread, multi-thread, mutex, and semaphore? So threads are independent computation sequences. Multi-thread applications compute different operations at the same time to gain time, but are complex to successfully implement. Yes, that's true. In multi-threading, a mutex is an object used for locking sources, whereas a semaphore is an integer used for signaling. So semaphore is a value, you can think it's like a boolean. When it goes to 1, it means something, and 0 means something. On the other hand, mutex is like a lock, it locks a source. Semaphore supports wait and signal operations modifications, whereas mutex is only modified by the processor that may request or release as a resource. Semaphore values is modified using wait and signal operations. On the other hand, mutex operations are locked or unlocked. What is big O notation? It shows the worst case complexity of an algorithm. You should search and learn to find the worst time complexity of an algorithm. It's not that hard. Don't worry about it. What is the advantage and disadvantage of normalizing of a database table? The advantage is normalization reduces data multiplication, groups data logically, and enforces referential integrity. On the other hand, the disadvantage is it slows the database performance. You need to go there and go there and go there, and it's complex to successfully normalize a database. What is the difference between abstract class and interface? It's long. You can watch this video. How to compare two objects, equality. All classes extends object class, and object class has multiple methods such as equals, hashcode, string. To compare two objects, equality, we override the equals methods. coming from that object class and define our rules, comparing rules. Why encapsulation is done? It prevents outer classes from accessing and changing fields and methods of a class, and also helps to create setter and getter rules on data fields. What is the purpose of having a group by in SQL? You need to know SQL. Also, it asks in Java, it can be asked. So group by organizes similar data into groups. Another way of saying it gets summary data. The group by statement is often used with aggregate functions like count, max, mean, sum, average to group the results set by one or more columns. This is an example. And having exists because where cannot be used on aggregations. A having clause is in SQL specifies that a select statement must only return rows where aggregate values meet the specified conditions. And the last one is what happens when you try to put an already existing key element in the hash map. It does not give you an error, it just updates the key value. So it goes the value and updates that. That's all. Thank you for listening. Take care.